It's not often I get excited about a new webcam, but when it can do things like this, I think I'll make an exception. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. So, what I'm filming on today is the new OBSBOT Tiny 2, a diminutively sized webcam no matter what other webcam you compare it to, and at a price that is set to compete with used mirrorless cameras and even the most premium of webcams alike. At $329, the Tiny 2 is not trying to position itself as an impulse purchase for those wanting better quality in their Zoom meetings, but rather to content creators looking for top quality imaging in one of the smallest form factors you'll see in this market. Full disclosure before we get started, OBSBOT did send out the Tiny 2 for my evaluation about a month ago. Like all reviews on this channel, no money changed hands. OBSBOT has no input over the production or content of this video, nor will they see the review before you do. Spec-wise, the Tiny 2 is rocking a 2/3 inch image sensor with a 4K resolution, and it can output at both 4K 30 and 1080p 60 FPS. That 2/3 inch sensor is not the largest when it comes to webcams. That honor actually belongs to the Razer Kiyo Pro Ultra and its 1-inch image sensor. But it also has a similar price tag of $299. But at 2/3 of an inch, it's still in the upper echelon of sensor sizes you're likely familiar with. Non-flagship smartphone cameras are in the 1/2.5 inch, or about 6x4 millimeters in size. Typical USB webcams tend to be even smaller, with sizes closer to 3.5 by 2.5 millimeters. A 2/3 inch image sensor, or as OBSBOT calls it in their specs, 1/1.5 inch, is closer to about 8.5 by 6 millimeters in size. That might not sound like a huge difference, but like all camera sensors, even at this macro scale, a larger image sensor means larger individual pixels, the ability for each pixel to absorb more light, and to have less image noise when producing an image. While I am giving the Tiny 2 the best possible scenario when it comes to lighting, with $1,200 worth of studio lights around me, the Tiny 2 actually is delivering when it comes to image quality. Colors are crisp and vivid without being oversaturated. There's very little image noise, and what's this? There's actually some depth of field to the image out of a tiny little webcam sensor. That's like the trifecta of webcam dark arts all rolled into one cute little package. Webcams offering features like autofocus in their lenses never really made the most sense to me, as most of the time, any focus point further out than about a foot from the lens was just infinite focus anyway. Elgato actually finally wised up and skipped mechanical autofocus altogether on their stream cam, making it a fixed focus unit. But the Tiny 2 absolutely blew my mind when firing it up for the first time. Mounted at about the same distance away from me as my normal streaming camera, which looks a little something like this, I get what looks like nearly identical depth of field. And this isn't faking it through software either. Focus is mechanical and can be adjusted in camera, letting me rack through the entire range to confirm this. Plus, OBSBOT's software also has a blurred background filter, but like all things in life, I prefer that natural and organic look. For a quick point of comparison, this is my Zcam E1 and 11-16mm lens at the same distance as the OBSBOT Tiny 2 that you've been seeing, in the exact same lighting scenario, exact same settings, everything else. And while the image on my face is definitely a little bit sharper, the saturation, obviously it's a little bit different. I don't have the camera tuned to the same color right now, but the depth of field is almost identical. It's about the same level of background separation and blur on the Ryzen box and the arcade cabinet. The bokeh is relatively pleasing in the same way, but if you consider the size difference of the OBSBOT Tiny 2 versus this behemoth I have in front of me, plus the fact that requires a mini HDMI to an HDMI capture card and its own dedicated power supply, you start to see where the convenience and image quality of this really start to weigh in its favor. But man, I also cannot get over how incredibly good looking this image is right out of the camera. Again, you get multiple options for video capture, from 720p and 1080p at either 30 or 60 FPS, and 4K at 30 FPS. What I've been filming most of this video at has been 4K 30, but cropped in nearly 40% using OBSBOT's digital zoom. The result is an image with roughly 1440p resolution that is both framed properly to my face while also not sacrificing video quality or needing to move the webcam into just the right distance from my face. I'm also dead serious when I say I'm going to be retiring my Zcam E1 Micro Four Thirds camera and Tokina 11-16mm f2.8 lens mounted to a speed booster in favor of the OBSBOT Tiny 2. It feels crazy and downright sacrilege to swap out a mirrorless camera with this much lens on it for a 2/3 inch sensor, but the image quality results here don't lie. Another increasingly common feature in modern webcams is high dynamic range, as they call it. Webcams typically have a very narrow dynamic range, meaning that you've likely experienced an image that can both be too dark and blown out all at the same time. Let's say you have a subject that is backlit, or a very bright key light on your face. Cameras combat this by producing HDR images, that is capturing a frame that is overexposed, and then a second frame that is underexposed, capturing as much detail as possible from the brightest and darkest elements in the frame, and then stitching them together before presenting you with the final image. The OBSBOT Tiny 2 claims to have a pretty neat party trick when it comes to creating high dynamic range images, and it's the use of its dual native ISO sensor. A quick breakdown if you're new to camera terms here. ISO refers to the sensitivity of a camera's image sensor to light, that is, how quickly it can expose an image. The higher the sensitivity, the less light needed to produce an image. Dual native refers to the fact that the image sensor has two sensitivity modes, both of which produce clear images with little to no noise. The HDR party trick comes in with the Tiny 2 being able to capture two images simultaneously at both of its ISO settings, versus taking two pictures back to back. This means HDR images are going to be cleaner when it comes to image quality and have little to no artifacts, like subject motion, caused by stitching two images together that are not identical. Producing HDR images with simultaneous capture is not a feature I've ever seen in a webcam, and in fact, it's pretty rare in tech altogether when it comes to cameras. Even flagship Android and iPhone models capture multiple images back to back, although they're much faster at doing that, and then stitch them back together in post. Not only is it very cool to see something like a webcam able to pull it off, it also does so to some pretty great effect. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I'm giving the Tiny 2 the best opportunity to look good in this video, and it's not because I'm trying to shill for the Tiny 2, it's that I turned my lights on at the same brightness and color temperature and everything else that I always do, and it's producing an image that is unlike any other webcam I've ever seen, and I'm here for it. Like I mentioned, I've been testing the Tiny 2 for almost a month now, and was able to take the camera with me to my trip to Augmented World Expo in California. With the help of the Tiny 2, we did our weekly live stream, Talking Heads, live from Fault Line Tap House in Sunnyvale, California. The setup was incredibly simple, needing only my laptop, my Rode Wireless Go 2 microphones, a table clamp, and the webcam. For a run-and-gun podcast production setup with a high-quality camera, that's the lightest my bag has ever been, which means you might start seeing some more on-location streams in the near future, hopefully. But that brings me neatly to the most obvious feature on the camera that I haven't talked about yet, the fact that it's mounted to a 2-axis gimbal. At $330, the OBSBOT Tiny 2 is a very expensive webcam, but it does justify that price tag with a fantastic image quality. It's also the pan tilt and AI tracking, though, that make it stand out from the crowd. Shooting an episode of Talking Heads in one of the worst camera situations possible, that is a dark restaurant environment with a bright sunny day out of a window behind us, made me an absolute believer in the video quality. And being able to reframe on the fly through both AI tracking and software-controlled pan tilt zoom, life-changing to say the least. But probably the most impressive thing about the Tiny 2 is all of the processing happens on the camera itself. The image processing, application filters like color shifts and background blur, AI tracking, it's all completely agnostic to whatever device you've plugged it into. How do I know that for sure? Well, first off, the Tiny 2 runs off a standard webcam driver, so it was recognized and installed on my PC a full 5 weeks before its release, without me installing OBSBOT software or any other software at all. Second, I plugged it into my Android phone and used both AI tracking and gesture control on a generic USB webcam app. So I can assure you the processing and recognition was not being done on Android. Now, as hyped as I've been on this camera, there are a couple of downsides that I noticed during my review, and they bear mentioning here. Now, one of them could probably be fixed in software in the future. The other is just basically a hardware limitation, and we'll start with that. While this webcam is a 4K native webcam and can produce images at 1080-60 or 4K 30, that 4K 30 image requires a crap ton of bandwidth. To be able to capture images at 4K 30 without dropping any frames, you really need the best quality USB-C port. My issue is that even times that I've adapted the USB-C on the camera to a USB-A and plugged it into a Gen 3.2 USB port, which is still capable of 5 gigabit per second, I still drop frames. It's only when I go to a 100% native USB-C connection that it seems to stream smoothly. Now, while this may end up being an issue that is fixable in software, this feels more like a hardware limitation, either from power delivery over USB-C native or just bandwidth requirements of the camera itself. My second issue is the AI tracking, or more specifically, the framing when AI tracking is enabled. What I have set up on the camera right now is a pretty good framing if you follow the rule of thirds. That is, the center of my face, my nose, is about 1/3 of the way down on the screen. There's not a lot of lost space around me, and this periphery is filled with objects of interest. I've got my arcade cabinet, I've got a sneak peek of what I'm going to be doing with the Fractal Design Terra in an upcoming video. Yeah, everything belongs there for a reason. But now, as soon as I turn on AI tracking, you can see the frame shift up, and it puts my nose pretty much dead center on the frame. And for me, this isn't the best looking image, and I have no way to tell the AI that I want it shifted one direction or the other. No matter where I move on this frame, my nose will stay dead center. And I wished I had the ability, either in software, firmware, tracking, gesture, ability, whatever, to say, I don't want my nose dead center, I want it a little higher on the frame. Because right now there's now a bunch of wasted space around me, and it's not the best that it could be. All that being said, there have been very few times that I've accepted webcams for review in the history of this channel. The feature set, quality, or value needs to be something innovative, because just about any company, it seems, can pump out a webcam and trick a segment of the audience into thinking, this camera with this Sony image sensor is surely better than whatever the other company is putting the same image sensor into. It happens all the time. I've been looking for a multi-angle AI-tracked webcam solution for what feels like a decade now, and I've got the original Mevo cam on my desk right now to prove that. While software was the Achilles heel because you couldn't use the Mevo cam with whatever streaming platform you wanted, the Tiny 2 functions as a normal webcam with all of its processing on board, and that feels like an immediate leg up. The Tiny 2 is my first go-around with OBSBOT, and I have to say I am thoroughly impressed with what I see here. While, yes, $330 is steep for a webcam no matter how you slice it, I also made the decision during this review process to replace my Z-Cam and lens setup both for image quality and flexibility. It's able to do what practically no other webcam can: provide image quality on par with entry-level mirrorless camera setups while adding versatility and ease of use to your camera setup. I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you've been thinking about picking up a Sony a5000, a Z-Cam E1, or any other mirrorless camera with clean HDMI out just to get better quality video on your PC, maybe reconsider and check out the OBSBOT Tiny 2. It is available today, and if you're interested in picking one up, I will have affiliate links down in the video description. On your way down there, make sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. And if you like the content you see on this channel and want to help support me in all of my daily shenanigans, think about going over to craftcomputing.store, picking up a Craft Computing Rocks glass, and start drinking like a pro. That's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, everyone. I'm gonna have to come up with a name for that. Beer for today is not a beer at all. In fact, we are making a cocktail that was crowdsourced by my Discord peeps during the after party. By the way, if you want to check out all the shenanigans that happen over on the Discord server, make sure to join the Patreon, link in the video description. Anyway, I'm not a huge fan of tequila. I've said this many, many times, but it just has never jived with me. However, Chris over at Coalition Gaming actually got me turned on to some mezcal, and mezcal is like the rum of tequila. It's the Wild West. There's no rules other than it's an agave spirit, and so it kind of turned me on to liking certain aspects of agave and tequila. And today we have a bottle that I never thought I would buy. I was in the liquor store and found myself just kind of staring at this one. This is Hornitos Black Barrel. It is an 80 proof añejo tequila, but it has been aged in charred oak, and you can just see how freaking dark that is. And I'm a sucker for a good whiskey or a rye, and this just kind of caught my eye. So, what are we making today? Well, this is, again, kind of a crowdsourced cocktail that we came up with in an after party one day, talking about tequila and mezcal and what do you do with it. So first off, I'm going to toss my one giant rock into my craft computing rocks glass there. We're going to use a mixing vessel. I'm going to add a little rock and a giant rock, and we're going to mix up this cocktail. Now, your first lesson of the day is, I know it's sexy to add the alcohol first, but have you ever screwed up a cocktail and had to dump it out because you added too much of an ingredient, or you squeezed too much of a lime or something like that? Yeah, I like to avoid doing that. So instead we're going to go in reverse order. We're going to do the cheapest items first, and that is a 2-to-1 simple syrup. We're going to add 3/4 of an ounce of that. Next up, I'm going to squeeze half of a lime into this guy. Next up, for bitters, I think this is really what ended up making this whole cocktail. First off, we've got Reagan's Orange Bitters number 6. We're going to add 4 dashes of that. Then I'm going to add 4 dashes of Peychaud's Bitters. Good old New Orleans Peychaud's Bitters. Last but not least, we're going to add 2.5 ounces of our Hornitos Black Barrel. It might have been closer to 3. And finally, give this thing a nice little twirl. And unfortunately, I realized last second that my strainer is dirty upstairs, so I'm going to kind of ghetto strain this with my bottle opener off my bar. Since I'm using just 2 giant rocks, it makes it a lot easier. So, there we go. And finally, garnish that with a lime wheel. I'm just going to dunk that right in. And there you have it, the Craft Computing crowdsourced tequila old-fashioned. Cheers, guys. Make up one of these for yourself, and let me know what you think down in the comments.